Alrighty, it's recording. I want to introduce myself. I am Sarah Kiefer. I am a technology integration specialist in Cincinnati, Ohio for the Ross Local School District. I was a classroom teacher for 14 years in 5th grade and 7th and 8th grade, and then I was offered the position to switch to being a tech integrationist, and that put me down at the elementary. So it was a complete 180 from everything that I had been when I was in the classroom, and I really fell in love with it. It's challenged me, it's forced me to grow, and teachers would come to me and they'd say, I want to try to do this with my kids, and then I would be like, oh, well, this is what I do with 7th and 8th grade. But then I go, that's not going to work in a 1st grade classroom, is it? So like learning that whole new mindset, that whole new thinking, and that kind of is a great background story to share with you today about Google Classroom, because, and I hope I'm not disappointing anyone, this is not a training on how you like do the technical pieces of Google Classroom. It's more of the mindset behind what you are doing in Google Classroom, why you're doing things in Google Classroom, why you're setting it this way or that way. So it's more the mindset behind it. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen though, because I do have some information, because I am going to go ahead and do a training with my innovator coach. I am a Google certified innovator. I went to New York last year, and I was fortunate enough to be connected to Desiree Alexander, who is helping host this whole entire conference. And she has given me the opportunity to do some teaching about Google Classroom. And that will be, let me go to the next slide. There it is. So this is about 4 slides in. Yep, slide 4. So if you're interested in learning like the ins and the outs of Google Classroom, please join us next Tuesday, July 14th. The time is noon Central. It's 1 p.m. Eastern. When you add it to your calendar after you register, it should adjust to your particular time zone. And then I'm also doing one on Google Chrome next Thursday, as well as one the following Friday. And it's going to be a mashup of random, lesser used, not quite as the big hitters of the Google apps. And all of the information can be found here. When you click on this big button right here, it will take you out to the resource. So it'll take you to this document, and you can sign up with these links. You can see these are the sessions that we've already done. If you're interested in learning more about these are all posted out there on YouTube as well. And you're welcome to watch those. Resources are all tucked in on the show notes of the recordings. So back to my presentation. I'm going to go back. I'm actually going to get out of that. So starting with a little bit more about myself. I'm going to stay here. I apologize for all of the jumping around. A little bit about me. I do write a blog. It's called Tech You Can Do. And I do believe very strongly in that teachers of all levels, whether you're an intro teacher, you're a veteran teacher, you're somewhere in the middle of your career, technology is a great thing to have to enhance your classroom. So I try to share out a lot of the stuff that I do with teachers, things that I create. It's all free. You're welcome to read through it, find which works for you. Use the labels on the far right side when you navigate there, and it will allow you to look at these particular topics. So feel free to check out my blog. I'd love it if you're on Twitter, if you want to follow me. If you want to tweet at me, my handle is KieferSJ. You can click here, it's a hyperlink. And then up here in the top right corner on the front, on the title slide, if you'd like to make a copy of this, because this is meant to be a reflective document for you, please go ahead and click here, and it will ask you to make a copy. and then you can just say make a copy of, and then you're good to go, and it's yours. You can go ahead and type on it as we move through this. And I'd like to give a big shout out to Slides Mania. Slides Mania is the lady who provided this template for me. So we're going to go ahead and let's get Google Classroom. I'm actually going to come out of presentation mode. I find that a little bit distracting for this second. So like I said, this is not a specific training on Google Classroom. This is definitely more of the mindset behind Google Classroom. Slides Mania is phenomenal. So let's go ahead and start. If you're on this slide here, which is the 5th one in, these are all hyperlinked to the slides. So let's just go back into present mode. This will be fine. That's what I want. Okay. So these are all hyperlinked. So you can go in order, you can go out of order, you can jump back, you can go to whichever one that you want in present mode. When you're on your own and you've made a copy of it, please know that you see the slides over there, and you'll make it through. Now, I also have a wakelet of resources that you can jump to that has all kinds of stuff about Google Classroom, but we're going to start out with the purpose. What is the purpose of a Google Classroom? What is the purpose of anything? And that's the important part. Like, that's the first heavy hitting question, right? Like, you have to have a purpose. And if your purpose isn't exactly clear, like, that might be where people struggle. So Google Classroom is a class management system. And that just means, in the way I think about it, it's the ebb and flow of a digital classroom. How do you get digital items to a student? How do you get links to a student? How do you get digital assignments to a student, assessments? That's where Google Classroom is your best friend. It allows you to do that back and forth. And because it's a Google product, it integrates very well with Google Docs and Slides and Sheets and all of the other Google products, but it also allows for numerous outside websites, outside curricular activities. You can post things in there, you can make announcements in there. You can even go as far as asking your students questions where they can respond either, short answer, extended response. They can do multiple choice. It's a great way to even build some of that classroom community. But also think about Google Classroom as a great way, especially for the littler ones. Since I work with elementaries, I've talked a lot with my teachers about, if you can remember that these students are not, while we refer to them as digital natives, it's only because everything is digital when they're born. They don't have any more intelligence about how to use technology or how to use Google than any of the rest of us. They have to learn it just like they have to learn math, or they have to learn science or social studies. And yeah, some do take to it a little bit quicker than others. And that's okay. Some of us take to technology quicker than others. Some of us take quickly to math. Everybody has their strengths, but we have to use this to better serve our students. And think about Google Classroom, because the students can comment, they can post, they can reply to each other. This is a great place for the little ones to build that foundation of what is appropriate and what is not appropriate. And what better way than when they're young and they love school and they love their teachers, they will soak up whatever it is that they have to say. So if we as teachers can leverage that tool, instead of being fearful of it or saying that's one thing I don't want to manage, let's embrace it. Let's talk to the kids. Let's let them fail a little bit before they fail big time as teenagers or as adults when they make less than spectacular decisions. So if you can identify the purpose, like, I'm going to give all my assessments through Google Classroom, I'm going to post homework in Google Classroom, I'm going to communicate with parents, because Google Classroom does have that ability as well, communicating with parents, but I also want to leverage it as a means to teach my students how to better interact digitally. That can be a huge benefit to them and then to the rest of us, because if they learn that as a second grader, they move on to third grade, it's reinforced, it's reinforced, it's reinforced. Think about when they get to be teenagers, that's been drilled into their heads, just like 1 + 1 is 2. Now, how I've set this up is I give you this big card. We talk about it a little bit. And if you have questions, please pop them into the chat. I am keeping my eye on it. If you have comments, I'd love to see the comments as well. And then we can always close out of this piece to it, go to the next one. But I also have this reflection prompt. So when you click on this reflection prompt, I've got a slide for you, and this is where it's great if you've made a copy of it. And remember, you can always go back to that first slide and make a copy of it at any point in time. I've given you a thinking prompt. I want you to stop and I want you to do a little reflection. And I want you to sit here and say, okay, what is going to be the purpose of my Google Classroom? Am I only using it to post homework? Am I going to use it at the next level because I've been using it for 2 years and now I want to incorporate X, Y, or Z? And then on yours, when you have a copy of it, you can freely type into here and you can write a little note to yourself. These are the things that I want to tackle, or maybe you have more questions and maybe you need to write those questions down. You are more than welcome to reach out to me at any point in time. I do love having these. I don't call them philosophical because it's really more pedagogical, or what works best for you and your students. Because for those of you in Ohio, it might work differently than in Bangladesh, or than it is in Texas, or wherever we're from, North Carolina. So keep that in mind too. What works best for you doesn't necessarily work best for the teacher next door or the school down the street, right? Keep those things in mind. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm ready to close out of this reflection prompt. And it brings me back to kind of like the table of contents page. So here, let's go to the next one. What is the perspective? I bet you will go ahead and you go, okay, I'm going to set up my Google Classroom for the year and I'm ready to go. And you start organizing. I'm going to do this, 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 and this. Take a deep breath and I want you to pause for a minute. When we look at organization, I think a lot of teachers are either in the hyper organization realm, or I don't even know where to begin with organization realm. So I'm just gonna go through it as best as I can and hope that things work out. I want everyone to stop, because this became very, very clear to me during the remote learning. We closed down in the middle of March. This became very clear to me within the first month, I would say, that we were closed and we never got to go back to school, unfortunately, is that teachers look at how Google Classroom and how they organize their classroom very much from the teacher perspective. And you might sit there and go, Sarah, duh, of course they did. They're teachers. They're going to set it up for themselves, right? And I say, well, yes, but you're the teacher. You know what you're putting in there. You know where you're putting it. You know, because you're doing it. However, you're not the user. You're not the one that is trying to navigate. You're not the one that's trying to figure out, what is my teacher asking me to do today? And when we're face to face with our students, it's a whole different ballgame. We can look over their shoulders. We can stand here and say, now, Sarah, nope, scroll down. Yep, keep scrolling. Or, oh, now see that topic, go over here and click on that topic. Like, you can do that live and in person, but when we went remote, all of a sudden it was, I can't do that for my students, not at all. So stop and think. Don't set it up as what works for you. You're gonna figure it out. You'll know where you put stuff because you're putting it in there. But stop and think, what does it look like for my students? What does it look like for my students' parents? And I think if we carry that mindset through and we go through and we organize it that way, I think we can have a much better experience and a lot less frustration for us. I think we'll see a lot fewer emails and questions and please help me, or I can't find this, or what am I supposed to do today? I'm lost. I think we'll see a lot fewer of that. if we stop and we say, this isn't about me, if this is my classroom and I know what I know the assignments I'm gonna have, I know the assessments I'm gonna have, I know the activities I'm gonna have, but what does it look like for your students? And here's a couple of things that you could incorporate. 2 big tips. And this works for older students. It also works for younger students. And I think it works really well for the parents that are at home supporting them, or whomever is at home supporting them. If you can incorporate numbers on your assignments, even the littlest learners seem to grasp the idea behind numbers before they grasp the entire idea behind letters. And that's a general statement. I'm not saying that that works for every student, but if you come up with a numbering system like number 001, I always like to try to overestimate just for searching purposes later, but if you can assign each thing that you put in there as 001, 002, and so on and so forth, think about what that does for your assignments, for your activities. It puts them in an order. So if you're already on assignment 042, your students aren't going to be going back and looking at 002. Like that, those are 2 very different numbers. So if you can incorporate a numbering system and then translate that over into your, just literally like copy it over into your grade book, imagine the conversations like when parents are looking at Google Classroom and then they look at whatever the grade book is that's available to them. If they're matching up, I don't know what this assignment is, but then they go, oh, this is 10, this is 10. It becomes a very clear, it doesn't even matter what the title of it is. But if they can match up those numbers, they make that connection very quickly. Emojis are the same thing. You can actually add in emojis, and there's a couple of great websites out there, copy paste emoji, emoji dictionary, I think is one. You put in, just search for emojis. Use emojis because again, the little kids, this is great for little kids or struggling readers. Those are at all grade levels. And it kind of makes it a little fun. So if it's a reading thing, you could put in a little book emoji. If it's a science thing, find the cute little, like the microscope or, the atoms or whatever you could find as far as emojis go. But use those frequently, and they are better visualizations for these kids. They'll help them find the stuff quicker. They'll help find the stuff easier. And again, if you're in a remote situation, which we are truly hoping to go back face to face, we also understand that there will be students that will not be returning with us. And I know that there are districts that are not planning on going back. These remote situations really kind of put a different flavor on how we have to think about this. So just keep those couple of things in mind. If we can adjust our perspective as the teacher and stop organizing it what works for me and in my brain, but look at my students that are in front of me and say, what is going to work best for all of my 2nd graders? What is going to work best for my 10th graders? And organize for them. I really do believe we will be a lot less frustrated. And that goes back with how many classrooms do you set up? What's going to work best for your students, not what works best for me. If I have 12 different classrooms, because that's what worked best for my students, I can probably handle 12 tiles. How each of the classrooms show up as tiles. I can handle that. I'm an adult, I'm a professional, if that's what works best for my students. So take that mindset, and then let's check out what the reflection prompt is. How are you going to lay it out so it best fits your students? And again, we could have conversations between Texas and England and all that. You could have a conversation with teachers that teach in your district down the hallway, in a different building. That is a really nice thing about Google Classroom, is that you can customize that. You could even make Google Classrooms for your small groups. You can make Google Classrooms for 2 or 3 classes because you teach the same thing. We have that power, we have that ability. So,
Sarah, a quick question.
Yes.
Okay, so I like how you said about the numbering. And
Yes.
so you said basically a 3-digit numbering starting with a 0, and then you could put, so then after the number, you could put an emoji. I was thinking about the sorting purposes. So you use those 3-digit numbers to sort, and then you can do whatever you want after that. Is that
Yes,
what you're talking about? Okay. Because I haven't
absolutely.
done the grade book in classroom, so I didn't know how it's sorted, how you could sort it. I haven't used the grade book in there, so.
I believe the way the grade book works is, and I could be totally wrong, and that hopefully they're going to come out with an update, because if it still works this way, I do find it kind of frustrating. It puts the grade book just in order of how you put the assignments in. It doesn't even matter the naming convention at all.
Okay. So if
And
if you did it in a different, if you used a different grade book, then, well, the emojis probably wouldn't transfer over to a different program. Okay. I just
yeah,
was trying to get that oriented in my mind, how you could combine the two. I like that idea of the numbers and then the visual. So just as long as you get those numbers first, that should take care of it.
yes. And then that also does help for us as teachers if we need to come back and quickly find something. If you aren't aware of this, if you're on, I know it works on Chrome, I'm not 100% on the other browsers, but if you use the keyboard shortcut Control F, and you type in 001, it will search the entire website. And this is whether you're on your Google Classroom or you're just on a random website. If you do Control F and you type in a word, a phrase, something, a name that you're looking for, it will search that whole page, and it will actually give you the total number of things that you're looking for. I'm gonna, just real quick, I'm gonna come back over to this doc. So I'm on this Google Doc where you can register. And if I type Control F, do you see how that little screen pops up and it says find in document? So I could find, search for classroom. See how it's showing me there's 1 of 1. And then if there's like 5 in here, you can toggle up and down to get to quickly. There's only 1, so it would look different if you typed in YouTube. There's 5 of them, so it'll actually toggle you through the finds that it has. But I love that shortcut. It works on this. I've even seen it work on PDFs when I pull them up in my drive, typing in that Control F.
I think it works on everything. That's probably the only shortcut I have memorized, because it works on everything. I love it.
Yeah, I love it. It is so incredibly helpful. Yes. Okay, so let's move on to our third, divide and conquer. Here's another thing. This goes right back to what I was just talking about. How many classes do you have? And again, it depends on your student's grade. It depends on, I would also say, how much have they used Classroom before? If they're brand new to this, I don't know that having 7 different classrooms for them is ideal, unless maybe they're moving physically into 7 different classrooms, because then it kind of mimics their schedule. And this one really, really works well if you can sit down with your teaching team, if you can sit down with your building or your grade level, or however it's best divided up, and you guys all agree, because then you don't have the pitting of one classroom to another. Well, Mrs. Kiefer organizes her classrooms like this. We have like 5. And then, oh, well, in his classroom, we only have 2. You know, so if everybody can kind of get on that same page, and again, organize it how it's best for your kids, not for you as the teacher. I do feel like we try to oversimplify sometimes, and in that we complicate everything. So if you can think about how you're organizing for them as opposed to us, I think we can go a long way. Older kids 100% can handle more. And like I said, maybe it mimics their schedule. Maybe they are moving between 7 different classes. And if you're not aware, you can grab those tiles in Google Classroom and you can actually move them from that homepage. You can put them in any kind of order that you want. Naming conventions for your classroom would also be great. Maybe if everybody starts out with what that particular content is, you know, math, Mrs. Kiefer, social studies, Mr. Jefferson. However, you as a team, you as a group, grade level, however you're divided, if you guys can all agree on that, it makes it very simple. For littler kids, it might be great just to do the teacher's name. If you have one Google Classroom, honestly, it doesn't matter what you name it, but if you can say Mrs. Kiefer's first grade, It can make it very simple. It's very understandable for the kids. It's very understandable for their parents. So again, keeping in mind that whole remote idea. Maybe you even add in, like I have here, maybe you add in an emoji. Emojis are fun and they're very quick. Guys, find the emoji that has the stack of books. Even our littlest learners can find that. Even our littlest learners can figure that out. So help yourself out. Divide and conquer, but make it for the kids. So like I say here, like shift your perspective. Let's check out this reflection prompt. What's going to work best for your students, and how are you going to create the classrooms to better help them stay organized? Here's another thought I want to throw out to you. Over time, these Google Classrooms become very, very, very long, very lengthy, and then there becomes a lot. Again, depending on your grade level, but even if you're with young students and you use this on a regular basis, it can become very overwhelming, thinking of like social media streams where you just scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll, right? So here's an idea for you. Maybe every quarter or every semester, you create a new Google Classroom. Now that can help in a lot of different ways. And this is another way of thinking about dividing. If you have a first quarter class and then you move into your second quarter class, a lot of times those official grade breaks help with a new classroom because kids aren't then going back into first quarter work and doing that instead of what you need them to be doing. The older you get, you might want to think about a new classroom for each unit of study. So I'll go back to and use my own self as an example. When I was in 8th grade, I taught American history. So unit 1 was maybe colonization of America. So that could be one Google Classroom. And then when we're done with the colonization of America, I could archive that class. All of the grades are done. It's official. I don't want students going back. Maybe I do, maybe I leave it open. But now we're into unit 2, the American Revolution. So it helps divide out, not just for the students too, but in that respect, it helps me stay divided out and keeps me moving forward too. So you can even look at Google Classrooms in that respect. Now, whether you archive them or not, I would just never, ever, ever delete them, because as long as you're archiving them, you can go back in and you can reuse posts. And I know I said this wasn't a training on Google Classroom. It's really not. I'm just throwing these things out there. Join us on Tuesday, July 14th, if you're interested in learning more about those kinds of things. But how are you going to organize for your students? Not specifically for you. All right, any questions? I'm going to go back to our table of contents. Okay, so new classes. So here we go. Like I was just talking about, you don't have to have the same class all the way through. And if you go ahead, and here's a trick that and it's not a trick, here's a tip that I suggest, especially to our younger students. Some of them are going to get into it very quickly. Some of them are going to have such ease and comfort with being able to do this, especially given what their background is in use of Google Classroom. If you go ahead and you have something in there when they join, you can say, all right, everyone go to this link. Maybe you already have it linked for them. You click on it, they go in, they join Google Classroom, and once they're in there, there's an activity or there's a link for them to do or a question for them to answer. If you go ahead and you have something like that, students that are able to get in there quickly are not then sitting around and twiddling their thumbs going, Mrs. Kiefer, what do I do? What do I do? They're off and running, doing something, and then you are able to go around and help the students that are struggling. Maybe their trackpad isn't working, or they clicked on the wrong thing at first, and you help redirect them and all this. But this is the area that I was talking about, having a new class maybe for each topic of study. Maybe it's a way for you to help students self-pace. You could look at it that way. It doesn't have to just be everybody starts and stops, but maybe once they've mastered this topic, you can give them the link to go to the next Google Classroom, and they can start working on the next topic. You can really, there's no limit. And that's the pretty cool thing about all of these Google tools, is there's no limit really in the creativity and how you can use this. And that's where I love reading things on Facebook or Twitter or the blogs that I follow. And people have such creative ideas, and they're things that maybe I would never come up with, but reading it from somebody else, and a lot of times they have great stories behind them. Why did they have to do that? What made them go in that direction? And you hear that and you go, oh, that would probably work for me too. That will work for my students. So a lot of this is educating yourself and educating yourself on the possibilities of what you can do. So let's take a moment. Are you going to make new classes during the year? Or are you going to have one class for everything? How are you going to divide that? It really ties in nicely with our previous idea and topic that we talked about. And a lot of this is just, it's thinking, like, let's think about how we are doing this. Let's think about what's best for our students, and let's move forward with that. And again, this is a great place, once you've made a copy of this, for you to jot down your notes, your thoughts, your ideas, but maybe also some questions that you have. And maybe you know of somebody that you could reach out and talk to, another teacher in your building, a teacher in the building down the street, or somebody that you're in contact with on social media. I want to ask so-and-so about Google Classroom in this question. All right, this next one is easy, and when I learned about it, I fell in love, and I thought I would never suggest doing it any other way for the little guys. I think it will work great for the older students too, but it's, do you invite, or do you have them type in the code to join the class? Let's ponder that for a second. Just kidding, let's move on. Let's go in there. So there are actually two ways that you can get students connected to your Google Classroom. You can show them the classroom code, or write it up on the board and instruct them how to get there. Click on the little plus sign where it says join class, and then they have to type in their code. Perfectly acceptable, great way of doing it. My mind always shifts down to the little guys. I work with a building that has pre-K to 4. Pre-K doesn't use Google Classroom. Our kindergartners will start using Google Classroom this coming year. Our first graders will use Google Classroom more this coming year. And the best way for these little ones to join, 100% the best way. And I did not discover this myself. A teacher showed me how she had done this. She actually went through, and yes, this is a little time consuming, but I do feel like the younger you are, the more likely it is you're probably self-contained. So maybe you're talking about 20, 30 kids. She actually invited these students ahead of time. So when they clicked on the Google Classroom icon and they went in, they had one tile there, and all they had to click was join. They had one Google Classroom, and they click join, and they're in. Super easy. Yes, she had to type in, but because we're in a domain, once you start typing, names quickly pop up. So it was a matter of typing in maybe their first name and sifting through the 5 kids that have that same first name. You type in Sarah, maybe you get 4 of them back. You can recognize which student that you have. It's great. And then you never have to worry about, did they actually get in? Did they type in the right, is that a P or is that a Q? When we're talking about little kids, those letters can a lot of times be, even for our best readers, it's finding it up here and then finding it down on the keyboard. Love it. You can definitely use this with older kids. It's also a very quick way, very quick for getting students in. All right, let's reflect a little bit. Did you know about the invitation option? I didn't. Teacher showed it to me, and I would never suggest doing it any other way for my little kindergartners, first graders. Like, boom, let's just make this easy for them. Time factor. You want to talk about some frustration? Working with students on Chromebooks that have never used Chromebooks before, trying to find letters and all this in a classroom of 25, 30 kids. You're in for a treat. I love it personally. I absolutely love it, and I'll do it all day. And then think about, will that invitation work for you, or are you better served using the code? Because again, what works for you may not work for me or for the teacher down the hall. All right, about halfway through. I'm not seeing any questions in the chat, so I'm hoping that everybody's finding some good information and you haven't fallen asleep on me, I guess. Let's move on to topics. So topics are a fantastic way of helping organize, because I don't care how often you make a new class, whether it's by quarter, by unit, we don't need to be making classrooms every week, although that's a possibility, I guess. Using these topics can really, really, really help. And again, it can help your students. So scenario one, I'm in a first grade classroom. I have one Google Classroom, that's it. My kids know to go to Mrs. Kiefer's classroom, that's it. That's all they have. I can use topics to say, these are math assignments, these are reading assignments, writing assignments. Think about that when your students are at home. If you're in a remote learning time and your students are at home, they log into this one Google Classroom and you've said, I want you to work on math. Easy enough, like they click on that math topic and then they have the selection of anything that you've labeled math. You know, or maybe you label the topics by week, you know, week of July 12th. And they click on that and there's their math because you've used the emojis. Maybe there's numbering. Maybe there's a date that you use. But if you're using the topics to help direct them into getting what they need to get done, that can really go a long way too. If you have it by unit, maybe your topics are chapters. Or maybe it's like, this is your vocab work. These are your main ideas. These are your reflection questions. Or however you've divided up that unit, use that as your topics.
Sarah, could you use those topics could you move, again, I'm sorry, I've used an LMS, not Google Classroom. Could you use the topics to, instead of making a new Google Classroom, could you push that material into the topic? Mm-hmm. Would that be another way to do it?
Absolutely. You can use them. Yep. You create as many topics. I can't say as many. I think you are limited, but it's something like 50 or something. It's kind of a big number. And I would say if you're approaching that number, it probably is time for you to think about maybe a different classroom or getting rid of, maybe you have too many topics. Like there is that such thing, right? Like too many topics because you're dividing things up too much. But you can honestly use these topics to do whatever. You could have these must-dos and, you know, interventions or extensions or can-dos. I mean, you can really create these topics. But again, I ask you to use that perspective idea. What is going to work for your students? And again, students at home, what's going to work for your parents? If you label something with math, reading, and writing, and the information that the parents and the students are getting is that I need you to do this math assignment, parents are able to understand that. They're not always up on like our teacher speak, you know, all of the acronyms that we have, and, you know, like we just assume a lot. So if we can get away from that assumption idea and we just use some very clear indicators, the numbers I think are a wonderful thing. Like you could say, please do assignment 006, reading, blah, blah, blah. Parents are going to be able to find that. Little ones are going to be able to find that. Older students are not going to be able to say, well, I didn't know what you meant. Oh, you don't know what 006 is? You know, like that's what you put in your teacher bag of tricks. You do a lot of these things proactively to help lessen that I don't know or I couldn't find. Maybe you're the type of teacher that you have it, the homework, the quiz, the test, and then that's how you organize. But yeah, I mean, It's a limit to your creativity. How creative do you want to go with this? So here's where, jot down some ideas. What's going to make the most sense for your students? And again, take that veil of, I'm the teacher, I want it set up this way. That's nice, that's a nice thought, but not all of our students figure this out. And again, I encourage you, please talk to your teammates. Like if everyone that is working with these students can use the same lingo, think about how that translates for these kids. They're not, okay, well, this is how Mrs. Kiefer wants us to do it, and this is how Mrs. Jarvis wants us to do it, and this is how Mr. Henry does it. And like if we all can collectively agree, and this too, as she pointed out, like maybe she doesn't use Google Classroom, maybe you use Schoology or Canvas or some other LMS. A lot of these things, while I'm referring to Google Classroom, honestly, they can work for any of these LMSs too. If you shift your thinking from, I'm not setting up Schoology, that's the other one that we use for our older students. I'm not setting up Schoology for me, I'm setting it up for them. They're the ones using it. You know, there are different ways that you can label things in Schoology and the other LMSs. There are different ways that you can, everyone gets the ability to title their assignments. You can use the numbering system in any LMS, right? Because you're the one entering in all of this information. So keep that in mind too. I'm specifically talking about Google Classroom, but honestly, this could work across the board because it's more of the back end, like what is your mindset? What are you as the teacher like sitting there and you're thinking, how am I gonna make this work for my kids? Because at the end of the day, if they can't find the work, they don't understand what it is they're supposed to be doing, they're not gonna do it. So that's where we can proactively kind of work through some of this. All right, 2 more things. Due dates. Do you use them? Do you look at them, they're your best friend? Or do you go, oh, I hate due dates? Honestly, I do. I personally need due dates because when I know something has to get done by a certain date, I know that, I'm aware of that. And while I might procrastinate a little bit, I'll be honest with you, I do procrastinate a little bit. I get it done because I know it needs to be done. I've seen this and I'm guilty of it. If somebody comes to me and says, hey, Sarah, what about making a Google slide for different shapes? Great. Oh, I'm not going to use that for like 3 months. Okay. And then I never hear back from that person, or I contact them and say, hey, are you still, oh yeah, I'm still interested, but I'm not sure when I'm going to do it. Chances are I've got 12 other things that are going to crop up in the meantime. So if I never have like I need this done by, or please help me at, it doesn't resonate the same as, Sarah, can you come in at 9 o'clock on Tuesday to help my students? Well, yeah, that tells me you have an immediate need. So I also caution, like these due dates don't necessarily have to be these super hard and fast. You're going to fail if you don't hit this, right? They can be your best friend, especially in these classrooms, because they give a weight to an assignment if there is a date attached. I need this done by, I'm going to put this in the grade book by. Grades are coming due on X date, so anything that you want graded, adjusted, feedback on, what have you, I've got to have it 2 days in advance so that I can get it. If you can communicate that with your students, and due dates are a wonderful way of doing it, all the better. Don't look at due dates as these evil, mean things, because in Google Classroom, like in many other LMSs, it goes ahead and it puts it on a calendar that's attached. And even parents at home, they can see like, oh, it says that it's due on Friday. Are you done with it yet? If there's no due date, parents probably aren't going to notice it, right? So give it some sort of date. It gives it a value. And if students turn stuff in late, that's a different conversation, right? Maybe they were sick for 2 days. That happens all the time. Maybe they had to go to a funeral that day and they couldn't turn it in. That happens. Make those exceptions when it needs to be, and don't stress about that late marking. I do understand there are times where we need to have these hard and fast dates, but that's where I say put a date on it, because if you never put a date on it, you can never say, well, I needed it by such and such. You can say it all day long in class. You can say it all day long you want, but when you put that in there with the assignment, like it's there. You can adjust it too. You can modify that. So keep that in mind. But when you do that, like it gives that weight, and students and their parents, as well as yourself, you get that feeling and you understand. And I love it with Google Classroom. The really cool thing is that it'll show up on their to-do list. So even on the homepage of all their Google Classrooms, it'll show like, this is due on Thursday, that kind of thing. And when they click on it, it takes them right to the assignment. So it really works in a lot of different ways to giving these things dates. So using a numbering system, emojis, the topics, due dates, we can really clean up these classrooms and make it very simple and easy for our students, because again, those are our users, to achieve stuff, to accomplish things. So here's a reflection prompt. How do you see yourself using Google Classroom? Like, do you see yourself using the due dates or not? I have one more thing to get to, and this is CoTeachers. Oh, why did that take me there? Oops, I'm gonna have to fix that. There we go. CoTeachers, do it well. Use them. They're there. They're not just another body in your classroom. If you have CoTeachers, intervention specialists, anybody else that you would have in there, they can assign things to specific kids, and that works really well, because then no one knows what Johnny is doing versus what Sally is doing, because they only see their classroom. So if you have an intervention specialist that's in there with you, that person can assign to specific kids, but they have access to everything, which means they can help you out. They can see what you're putting in there. Maybe they can help grammar errors, spelling errors. Like spelling is really not my forte, so it's always nice to have that second set of eyes, so that I don't look like a goofball not being able to spell the. I always translate the T and the H. But co-teachers are really, really powerful people as well. So don't discount them. Make sure that they know their role, and welcome them. Encourage them to join with you. But they do, there's one caution, they do have the exact same privileges that you do, which means they can be deleting stuff, they can be grading things. So have that conversation with them. Make sure that you're all on the same page, regardless of how many people are in there. You can add in administrators if they so choose to be in there, substitutes or maternity leaves, or if you have to be out for an extended period of time, whoever's taking over, they don't have to recreate the wheel. You can just add them in on your classroom. It allows you, if you're able to still check, but it gives them all of the same rights and responsibilities as well. So keep that in mind too. And here's a big thing. Are you willing to give up that control? Are you willing to let other teachers in? And maybe you're not. And I might say like, that's okay, but that's really a discussion you need to have with your co-teachers. It's really a discussion you need to have with the people that are around you. And again, I beg you, please think about what is best for your students. Not what is best for me, what is best for my students. And if we can keep that, that's the same message that I keep saying over and over again. If you can keep that thought in your head, everything is going to work a whole lot nicer. All right, I just noticed the time. You are welcome to check out the Wakelet resources, as I have linked on here. You are welcome to join in. And I will say, if July 14th at noon Central Time does not work for you, if you go ahead and you register, Desiree will send you the recording after the fact. She also posts it on her YouTube account, and then you'll have access to it at any point in time in the future. So if you have any questions, or you have anything that you want me to respond to, either unmute yourself. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing, as well as I'm going to go ahead and stop recording.